Hi and welcome to tutorial 3 on Amazon Sumerian. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be continuing on from what we've created before. So if you remember, we created a VR room that has a TV, some furniture, and some lighting. And today we're going to be adding a little bit of interactivity to that room. That way if we have users that enter the room, they're not just there to look around, they can interact with some of the environment, and we're actually going to be providing somewhat of an entertainment outlet for them as well. So if you haven't done so already, if you haven't opened up your previous scene just on the dashboard, go ahead and find where you saved that scene to, or if you have it already open, just stick by. So you should have something, again, that looks very similar to this. Like I said previously, the furniture and everything like that doesn't need to look the same, but you need to at least have the TV and at least one, probably two lights in your scene. But other than that, you should have a room that looks fairly similar to this. So the interactivity that we're going to be creating is using two different editors. One is the state machine that's built into Amazon Sumerian, and I'll get into that once we get into it. And then the other one is a HTML editor. If you don't have much HTML experience, don't worry, it's going to be very easy. However, if you do have HTML experience, you might see that it can be a pretty powerful tool, especially if you know a little bit more in HTML. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to be using the state machine, which, to explain it, is it creates multiple states for different objects, and the different states you can almost think of as keyframes. And so the state machine says if an object is in a current state, it has these properties. If it's in a different state, it can have different properties. So what we're going to be doing with that today is actually creating a way to turn on and off the lights in our scene. So one state is going to have them be turned on. When the user interacts with an object, it's going to turn them off, and they'll be able to do this seamlessly. So in order to do this, we need to think about what object in our scene we might want to have the user interact with to do so. In my scene, it's going to be pretty obvious. I'm going to be using the lamp. So it's best, especially with lights, which if you go into the play feature, once it plays, you'll notice you don't actually see the lights in the scene. Obviously they're there, they're producing lights, but the user wouldn't see the little orb itself like you do in the editor here. So what we want to do is we want to pick an entity that the user can see and then attach the states to that. And I'll get into that once we get in here, but for mine it's going to be this little lamp here. It should be a pretty obvious thing for the user to say, oh, if I want to dim down the lights or turn off the lights, I'll go over and hit the lamp. So to get into the state editor, we actually need to add that component to our entity. So I have my lamp selected. I'm going to come over to add component, and I'm going to look for the state machine, which is right down here, and I'm going to add that to that entity. Now all this did was add the component. You can see here there's a little behavior. There's no behaviors attached to this at the time, so I need to add a behavior. What a behavior is it can control multiple things at one time, and then it can also react to other behaviors that are going on in the scene, and that'll make a little bit more sense here once we start creating our behaviors and our states. So to get started, I'm just going to go ahead and add a behavior, which is this little plus symbol down here, and it's going to open up the state machine editor window, which is this down here, and you'll see that it created state 1 for me. Up here is the name of the behavior, and I'm going to call this specific behavior light on/off. And so this is the behavior overall, and then I also have a name for the state down here. I'll get into that, but the behavior that I'm going to be controlling is turning the lights on and off. So that's how I'm going to name the behavior. How I'm going to name the first state is lights on. So I'm going to name that light on. And that'll just be helpful if I need to look for that specific behavior or that specific state. I'll easily be able to find it. Now right now this isn't controlling anything, it's not doing anything. In order for it to control something, I need to use this add action. Now the first thing that I want it to do is control my lights. So I'm going to go to add action, and you're going to see this add action pop-up menu come up, and you're going to see off to the left there's different categories for different actions that can be done, and there's also this search feature. And the search feature is really great if you're unsure of what something might be named. You can just kind of search a keyword that you think might be attached to it and it'll pop up. So for this I'm just going to I'm going to type in light. And you'll see, okay, there's an add light, remove light, and the one that I want is this set light properties. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow me to control the properties of that light. Alright, so I have that light properties action added in. However, it's not actually controlling any specific lights right now. You'll see this entity and this drop entity. What I need to do is drop whatever entity I want this to control into there. You'll see that I did lose my state editor down here when I did that. If you ever click off of it, you might get booted out. But how you can get back in is over here in your assets, there's this behaviors, and you might have to hit this little down arrow on your default pack, and then you can get back into that behavior in the state editor here. But to add that light, you need to know which light is which. Light, just the one that's named light is the first light in my scene, the original light, and then I added light 2. So the first one I wanted to control is just this light 1. And then you'll see down here that there's intensity, specular intensity, and range. Now, personally, I made some adjustments to mine, so I'm going to go and look at my light. So I'm going to click on that light that I added in, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to write down or remember these settings down here, because when the light's on I want it to be set to whatever this is. I like the look of this, so I want to keep those settings. So mine is 0.58 for the intensity, 1 for specular, and 60 for range. Again, to get back into that state editor, I'm going to go over here, find my light on and off behavior, and go back. So now I can type in those properties. So it was 0.58, 1, and then 60. So now this is saying when my lights are on, that's what the light is going to look like. Now I do have 2 lights in my scene, and when I have my user turn on or off the lights, I want both of them to turn on and off. Now I can't add a second entity to this, and I wouldn't want to anyway because I want their settings to be different. You'll notice that my lights are set at different properties. So what I need to do is just add an action and go back to set light properties again. You'll see that it remembered where I was at, so I can quickly add another one in. Now this time I'm going to add light 2. I'm going to go click on light 2, see what my light properties are. So this one's 0.51, then the specular is 1, and the range is 60. So now I have those set, and I have what settings I want my lights to be at when they are turned on. Now before I create another state for the lights to be off, what I need to do is add what's known as a transition to this state. So it's going to be wondering, what do I want my user to do in order to turn off these lights? So again, in order to do this, I'm going to go to add action. And since most of you are going to be using your browser to be able to test this, I'm going to go click and tap on entity. So that's going to add a little transition down here. You'll see it added it underneath the state machine editor over here. and it says on tap / entity, and that is a transition. So when someone clicks on that lamp, it's going to transition to the next state that I create. So now that I have that first one, I'm going to go to add state to add another state. You'll see that again this is named under the behavior light on and off, so all of the actions and states that are within here are underneath that behavior. And this one I'm going to name light off. Now I need to add action. I'm going to add my light properties again. So again, I'm adding 2 for my 2 different lights. And this one you don't necessarily need to remember your settings. You just need to make sure intensity and specular intensity are set at 0 for both of these. If you have 2 lights. If you have more lights, you'll need to add more. And if you have just the 1 light, you'll just have the 1. So again, any of your lights in here for the light off state, you don't need to worry about the range, just turn off the intensity and the specular intensity. Now finally I need to add another click, so if I want my user to be able to, once they turn the lights off, turn them back on, I need to be able to transition back to that first state. So I'm going to again add that click / tap on entity transition. Again, you'll notice it added it down here. Now to create these transitions, it's pretty easy. If you just click down here where the transition pops up and drag it over to what state you want it to transition to, it'll create a transition. So I can drag light on to light off, and then light off back to light on, and now it should work. It should, when a user clicks on it, at first it's going to be on, then it's going to turn off when they click on the lamp, and then if they want the lights to come back on, they can tap on the lamp again. Now in order to test this, we're going to use this play the scene button, which is going to play the scene within Amazon Sumerian here, the little browser. You might notice some of the controls are a little bit different when you get into play scene. My left click is how I'm orbiting around the scene, and then I'm holding shift and right clicking to be able to pan around the scene. But really once you're in here, all we want to make sure is whatever entity you click on to turn on or off your lights, that it works. So you can see here my lights turn on and off. Now you'll notice it's not completely dark in my room, and that's because we did add a little bit of light to this TV, which we did want. So when they go turn off the lights, they will have some light to be able to see in the scene. So that works properly, so I'm going to close out of that. And so now we have one level of interactivity, and that's showing you the state machine. Now the state machine can be used for much more than this. It can add a lot of different behaviors, like continuous motion, and other things like that. But just to give you guys a little taste of what the state machine can do, we're just doing this little simple interaction here. Now I don't need the state editor anymore, so I'm going to close out of that just to give myself a little more room to work with on the screen. And the next thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using an HTML entity, and I'm going to be combining that with our TV to be able to stream a video within our scene. So the first thing I need to do is put this HTML entity in my scene. So I'm going to come up to create entity up here. And I'm going to go down to HTML3D, which is a 3D HTML entity. And you'll see it adds it to my scene here. I'm just going to move it up so you guys can be able to see this. But you can see it's just kind of a flat panel on there. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to make sure that it basically covers this same area as the TV screen over here. So first of all, I need to get it into position. So for mine, I'm setting my y-axis rotation to -90. And then I'm just going to use the transform arrows to get this into position. Now when you're putting this into position, you want to make sure that it is hovering just barely in front of that TV screen. So you want to be able to see it, but you don't want it floating so far off that if someone were to walk close to the screen or anything like that, they're going to see a noticeable gap between that front of that 3D object and this HTML entity. So I'm going to try and position that somewhere around the middle for right now. We'll be able to adjust that later on, but you'll notice that right now it's just a square, and I want it to be able to fit this screen here. So I have some very specific scaling numbers that I need to add in to make sure that this is filling that same area of that screen. So I'm going to type those out and say those out loud. You might want to just pause right here, grab a piece of paper, and write these numbers down, or if you're able to, just memorize the numbers that I'm going to be typing in here. But first, make sure your uniform scale is off. Then for the X scaling, it's going to be 2.9. For the Y scaling, it's going to be 1.449307. So again, I'll pause here for a little bit just so you can see that on screen and write that down. Then finally, for my Z-axis, it's going to be 1.457094. And that should give me that HTML entity about the same size as my screen. Once I get it to that size, you might have to readjust some of this to make it fit perfectly. But again, these numbers here are the numbers that you'll need to type in for that scaling so that it fits on that screen. So again, make sure you're taking your time getting this into the correct position on top of that TV. Now our next step is going to be adding some HTML code to signify that we want this to be able to play a video. I'm going to move my screen around a little bit here, sorry. Alright, I'm happy with that. So in order to get into the HTML editor, underneath this HTML 3D here, we have this Open in Editor. And this is going to open us up to an HTML editor. You'll see here the font size 24, and it has the text in there, which you see on screen there. So this will work just like any HTML document. Any of the coding or anything like that will work. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a YouTube iframe to this so that when someone's in here, they'll be able to play a YouTube video of our choosing. So I went out, found just a music video that I want them to be able to play while they're in the scene. Again, I'm just using YouTube for this. You can use whatever YouTube video you want. And in order to add this to my scene, I'm going to go down to Share. Then I'm going to select Embed. And now I have a few different options. I want it to start at the 00 mark. I want them to be able to control the volume, things like that within the scene. And then I'm going to show them the title and player actions. Originally this show suggested videos when video finish is turned on, so if you want them to be able to get to other videos, you can allow that, but I'm going to turn that off for now. And then I'm just going to copy this HTML code up here. Then I'm going to come back to my HTML editor. Going to delete all that HTML that's in there already and paste in this iframe. Then I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And I can close out of there, and you can see that it already puts that video on that screen there. So now I want to be able to also test this within my scene, so I'm going to go ahead and hit play the scene. Going to check my light real quick. That works. And then you have to be a little bit careful if you're doing this from this play the scene. I find that I have good luck with playing the video from up here in the upper left. If you try and play it from here, it might actually open it up in your web browser. But you can see there that I can click on the screen and it'll start playing that video, play the audio within the scene there. So we have a little entertainment form for the users within our scene here. So that's going to wrap it up for this third and final tutorial over Amazon Sumerian.